All right, guys, so welcome back to the channel. If you guys are watching this when it originally aired, it's Christmas Eve, so Merry Christmas 2023. Wanted to get this out for you guys. So this is really an episode of, and it's just gonna be all me talking, so feel free to skip it. It's a lot of babbling, but this is what I learned and what I would do differently, LS swapping the Disco 2. So going back to the beginning, I bought this car. I sold I think it was a 2014 Chevy Silverado. It had the LS-V8 and it had the 6L80 transmission. So I don't even, LS experts out there will know better what I did, but I love the reliability of it. I love the power delivery, everything about it. It felt solid. I never questioned getting in that thing and driving, 500 miles someplace. The thing was solid. So traded that truck in, always wanted the Disco, started laying a Gentry, the business, and was kind of really, getting that going. I wanted to have a Land Rover for that, a Disco for that, right? For a lot of the first that Discos come with AC, heating, leather seats, automatic gearbox, all this stuff. And I just love Discos. I think where I fell in love with Discos is there was an old movie, I think it's called Parenthood. It had Julia Roberts and I don't know, the lady from Bull Durham, Susan Sarandon was in it, and I fell in love with her. I think she drove a Disco 1, but I loved that car, and I always swore I was going to own one. So fast forward, I find this one advertised on Facebook. It was $5,500, and I was like, all right, let's go check it out. So take the Defender over, I go look at it, and right off the bat, the power steering pump's squeaking. There's oil spitting out, and I asked the dude, I'm like, what's up with this, man? And he's like, oh, well, you're mechanically inclined, you know how to fix that. I'm like, but I don't want to buy a project. I'm just, trying to do this stuff. He's like, all right, let me do this. Let me just take $1,000 off. And I'm like, okay, well, let me drive it around for a second and we could have a deal. Drive it around, car drives fine. He left it in sport mode, so it was a little bit more powerful. I'm like, wow, these aren't as bad as I thought they were gonna be, right? So going back to the early 2000s, you read about Discos and Motor Trend and stuff, and they're underpowered, but I was like, this feels pretty good, honestly. So go back, work out the deal with them. I thought $1,000 off for a power steering pump was a hell of a deal. I think the power steering pump was $120 and the belt was $30. So it was an easy fix, right? So get that up, drive that around for about a year, go down to Galveston with my mom, and I had I think it was an LX 460 or 470. It was an '04 model with that 2UZ in it. And it was that was a solid, great car. The only thing that went bad on it was the airbags went out on it. And I should have taken that down to Galveston, but I didn't want to get sand all in it. I didn't want to get the dog all in it. And I didn't really want to get that thing all camped out, for all the reasons. So take the Disco down there, have a great time. Disco performing $1 million, right? On the way back, the bed at about hour and a half from Frisco, and so basically it sat for a month or two. Randomly went out there, charged the battery, started it right back up, drove fine, drove around for another 90 days. the thing seemed fine, but basically at the end it gave up the ghost. And I always knew it was going to need an LS swap, so I had always kind of planned for it, just when's the timing right. Fun fact, when I pulled the engine out, there was half a gallon of water in the thing. So obviously the head gaskets went on it, or the liners, or whatever goes wrong with those engines. So long story short, I needed to start finding a new LS engine, and anyone that's ever done that on Marketplace knows the scams, the nightmare, the dodgy people, the tire, everything's a mess, right? So I find these boys in Fort Worth that seem really solid. They had the engine I wanted, everything, the whole package. So I go out there and look at it, and I'm like, I took the electric BMW out there, so I couldn't lug it home that day, right? And I was still a little iffy whether I wanted to do this deal or not. So long story short, I'm driving back, and I'm like, all right, these kids seem solid. I'll buy this engine off them. Text them hey, pull that engine. I'll pick it up on Monday. Let me know if you want to deposit. They're like, no, just pick it up on Monday. Monday comes around, they're like, oh yeah, no, we have this 4th gen that you would love. It's only $300 more. It's got the engine, it's got the gearbox and everything. And I'm like, no, I just want the engine that we agreed to. Well, it turns out the kid sold it, and I'm like, I knew they were young, but I'm like, all right, whatever, boys. So I go out and for whatever reason, I went back to that well. The same thing happened, and what I realized is that these kids are high school students, and I get that I'm old and I don't really. They seemed young, but I mean, they also seem like entrepreneurs. So I thought, well, maybe they skipped college and they're just like trying to get this LS business up and running. Fun fact, they're not. They're just kids behaving like kids, and they just didn't really know how to deal with adults very well at all. So I started having to look elsewhere, and I found this place up in Bonham, Texas, and the plot of land that these things were on was kind of dodgy. Let's just back up. You can't just go down into a junkyard in Dallas anymore and just pick up an engine. The days of like running out a gantry crane and like yanking an engine out and whatever you wanted out and then working out a deal with a junkyard, those days are done, right? These cars, they come in, they immediately go to the shop at the junkyard, they yank they do dropouts, right? And then they push all the cars out onto the lot for you to like rummage through and pick up things like door handle pulls or whatever the crap you need. So you can't just like go and pull a whole engine out or ECM out or anything like that. So go to Bonham. This guy's got like a compound basically. I would be shocked if they're not cooking meth out there. But he's a hell of a cool guy. Very, very honest. I accidentally almost overpaid him like $100. This guy's like, no man, this isn't the way this works. Like this isn't a tip situation. Like very, very honest dude, gave me everything that I needed and more for the car. He's like, you wanted to drop out, I'm giving you everything. And so I got the engine, it had like 170,000 miles on it. I think I paid 700, 750. I don't even remember how much it was. It was a great deal for everything I got. And so that brings me to the refresh. You guys saw on the video all the refresh stuff that I did, everything that I refreshed on it. I didn't do a rebuild, I just basically did a refresh, and I would do everything that you see in those videos, I would do it all over again. The only thing I would probably do differently is I probably would have redone the lifters, and the problem is you start to get like scope creep and budget creep on all these things. So that's the one piece of mind that I probably would have redone the rocker arms, redone the springs, the lifters, that kind of stuff. But I didn't, and it's going okay. So I'm about 80% confident with my work on that engine. 90%. It feels pretty good. So everything that I did, the oil pump, water pump. What else did I do? I reused the disco alternator. That was brand new. Reused the power steering pump. That was brand new. Disco power steering pump. That was brand new. So all of that was all good. So I'm really happy with that part of the work, which kind of brings us up to the kit, right? The kit itself. And there's a couple different ways you can do a swap into a Disco 2. You could do a transfer case adapter, which is where the GM engine and transmission bolt onto a transfer case adapter, and then that transfer case adapter bolts to the Disco transfer case. And everyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that transfer case, for better or worse, goes all the way back to the Defender, maybe even before that. But I mean, it's a pretty solid unit. Now mine does not have the center lock differential, so I need to correct that at some point. But it goes into a really robust transfer case. So that's one option. Now the downsides of that are the upside of that is you're using all the GM wiring to run the engine in the transmission, and that's it. Now the downside of that is at some point that has to talk to the Discovery for the speedo, the tacho. I sound like a Brit right now. Tacho, the tachometer, and the things like water temp and stuff like that. So that's sort of a benefit to the Ace. Now the other way you can do it is you can do the Ace kit. The Ace kit involves it involves a new bell housing, right? So it comes with a new bell housing that bolts right up to the, if I remember correctly, bolts right up to the LS. And it does use a sandwich plate, a 1 inch or maybe 3/4 inch sandwich plate. And it all kind of bolts up. And the idea is that you retain the HP22. And the reason for that, and he said this a couple times on the forums, he's like, I try to do this as budget friendly as I can, which is great, but I'm not looking for, the problem, this is on me. I bought the kit because of, let's just back up, right? So I bought the kit for the documentation, the tried and true. There was a number of people online that have done this swap a number of times with that kit, and there was a lot of benefit and warm fuzzies that came from that, right? So going back to the kit, yeah, it uses a sandwich plate. It uses the same torque converter. It uses a little adapter for the torque converter, and everything bolts up to the HP22 and blah blah blah. Everything is supposed to work great. There's just so much with that kit. There really is. There's standard bolts, there's metric bolts, there's bizarre stuff like hanging a crank position sensor at one of the lower points of the engine, just raw dog out there. Just spinning around at, we're talking like 16 thousandths or 12,000. It's like, it's so close. And one little branch hitting that is gonna knock out all sorts of for the engine. It's not a good design. So there's going to be some coverings that have to be fabricated that go around it. It honestly makes my head hurt. It gives me anxiety just even thinking about the stuff that I need to do to this kit to make it more off-road ready before you can even do any of that. So the other challenge with the kit is the documentation is absolute garbage. It uses children's drawings for things like the belt wrapping. It uses children's drawings for the wiring. And that's if you can even get the documentation, right? So I paid $2,300 for my kit from a local shop here, right? I don't know why they had an extra kit or what have you, but they sold it to me. It was $2,300. That was a fair price. Maybe I paid $2,100. I don't know. It was between $2,100 and $2,300. It was what I feel was a pretty substantial money for a piece of kit. And does not come with any documentation, does not come with any way to get documentation. It's just, you're out there on your own with the exception of Facebook groups and some internet stuff. It's just, it's almost criminal that this man, first of all, he should never, ever, ever sell himself. The phrase ACE, or alternative conversion engineering, which is what ACE stands for, that engineering should be lopped off. It should be an AC kit. There's no way this man is qualified to call himself an engineer. And God bless him, this isn't really his fault, but the man is also colorblind too, right? So like, these are standard Land Rover colors and they are way off. In the documentation, it is absolutely way off. You go through, you're doing continuity testing, and you just realize that the man can't see the reality of what's in front of you and help you kind of correct it. So basically for me, every reason that I bought the kit was null and void when I started to get into all these different troubles for all these things, right? It's not worth it. So that brings us to the next step. Like, what would be the ideal? If you're doing a disco kit, what would be the most beneficial based on my experience? Or what would I do differently if I do this again, which I probably will? What would I do differently on it? And I thought about this a lot. Because this swap, if you think you're going to do this swap in like 2 weeks, we can get into that later. What would I do differently? I would use the 4th gen engine that comes with the 6L80 transmission. That's precisely what I would use. I think, based on what these kids said and like what some other folks have said on the internet, you need to do a displacement on demand delete, which is pretty detailed, but no more detailed than what I did. The only difference is that there may be some machining involved and that may add some more steps, but I wish I would have gone down that path. So what would that have allowed me to do? That would have bolted right up to the transfer case. Now, some transfer case adapters say like, if you look at Mark's 4-wheel drive, and I talked to Mark's 4-wheel drive down in Australia quite a bit. They're like, the transfer case has to move back 10 millimeters, which isn't a lot. That's really only like, I think 3/8 of an inch or thereabouts. If that were the case, then that would have been fine just to shift that back a little bit. This transfer case from the guy that I bought the Ace kit from, he showed me a transfer case kit, and it doesn't require any movement at all of the engine and the gearbox. That would have been ideal. I really wish I would have gone down that path. And then I would have gotten the GM reliability engine, the GM reliability gearbox, and it would have gone into that rock solid Land Rover transfer case. That would have been, I think, ideal. So the one downside of that is like you have to be able to see what are your RPMs, what are your water temps, what are your what's going on with the speedo, that kind of stuff, and that would have been a little bit more of the challenge. But I feel like when I get to the next part about wiring, that would not have been as insurmountable as it might seem. So I really wish I would have gone in that route. That kind of brings us to the wiring at all, right? So wiring seems very daunting to a lot of people, and it is daunting. It really is. So to go back even further, and I mentioned this in one of my previous videos, one of the things I did when I first started really getting into cars, I built the car from scratch. It was basically like a Super 7 type car, all custom F1 style suspension. The thing weighed like 925 pounds. It used a motorcycle engine. I think it was the last carbureted engine that Honda created. It was out of like a 98, I think, CBR 900RR is a Fireblade engine. But it was easy, right? So the harness was really small. It just ran the engine, and everything worked. I mean, mind you, it had carbs, but I mean, that's fine. It had individual coils per cylinder. Like everything was fine. That was fine. And the nice thing about motorcycle engines is that motor and that gearbox are cast as one, right? So it's just one closed unit. And you just put a drive shaft adapter on the gearbox, run a drive shaft, and you're off to the races. And then the chassis harness on something like that is really easy, right? You're just wiring up flashers and lights and fans and crap like that. So that was easy. With this, it was a lot different. So what I did was the engine came with the red-green harness. So I pared all of that down to operate as a drive-by cable. But I wasn't very confident in that. And what basically happened was it needed to really be there's just too many variables. So I went on eBay or Amazon, I think it was Amazon, and I'm like, you can find these things for like $100 bucks, $150, something like that. And you cross shop that with like a real harness from someone like Painless, or I don't even know if Painless is any good, but regardless, you find that with a real like standalone harness from the internet, and those are like $500. And I really should have gone with that. I really should have gone with the $500 harness for lots of reasons. Mostly confidence, right? So my harness here, I knew it was gonna be about like 90%. And the thing is, it's like, we've all dated those naughty girls where you wanna trust them, and everything in your heart says to trust them, but you know you shouldn't do that. And that's what happened. It's just, the harness is not trustworthy. It's not seeing O2 sensors. It's causing map problems and stuff. And it all comes down to like some of the pins aren't correct. And I pinned out most of it. The problem is what I pinned out is not having any of the problems. There's all this stuff. It's the oxygen sensors in the map that I didn't pin out that's causing the problems on the thing. So that's on me. So yeah, I gotta pull the ECM back off, do a bunch of continuity tests, and basically rewire it so that it sees the upstream O2 sensors. Because really what it's in that cold start, you know how when you start a car, it kind of runs really funny for a few minutes. I can't remember if that's open loop or closed loop, but it's in that loop. It's in that loop system. And it won't switch into the warm system because it doesn't see the O2 sensor. So obviously I can't pass inspection with that, and it's just running extremely rich. I'm getting really gas mileage right now. So that's a huge thing, and that's a big learning. Is like you get what you pay for, and I kind of knew that. Like with this harness that I have now, like a lot of the connectors weren't robust at all. I had to end up chopping off a lot of them and splicing in original GM harnesses or harness connectors for stuff, and And so, yeah, that was a big thing. That's not the place to save budget, is in the wiring harness. It's either one of those, you man up and you trim down the stock harness the way it's meant to be and the way it's extremely well documented all over the internet, or you just buy a real standalone harness, someone that can actually support you and can actually like talk you through if there's a problem. So that was a huge learn for me. I still got to go out there, and there's a lot of going on with this harness out here. I got to go through and figure out that stuff, and that's honestly tomorrow's problems. But and by tomorrow's problem, that's literally what I'm working on for the remainder of the week. But so yeah, that's a big one. So like, I guess now is a good time to talk about really what works well. One of the things I think is pretty cool is the that fan system that I designed with the shroud and everything. The internet told me it was never ever going to work, and that still remains to be seen, to be honest with you. But I can tell you right now, from driving with 100 miles on it and just driving pretty normally, like somewhat hard, somewhat gentle, and in between, the temps stay around 210, 215 degrees. So I don't know if that's normal or that's not, but it definitely doesn't seem to be overheating. And that fan seems to be working okay. Now, I'm not towing a 2-axle Airstream behind me ripping through Vail, Colorado in the mountains. So, I mean, it might kill the transmission. I don't know. But that wire, that coolant seems to be working okay now. The other thing that I think that I did that's pretty cool, that I'm kind of proud of, is that transmission cooler seems to work out. So I did that big, massive transmission cooler with all those AN lines going to it, and that seems to be working great, man. I like that. To me, I feel like I'm shocked that wasn't more of a problem. I thought that I'd have leaking connections and like it wouldn't shift right. The fact of the matter is that thing shifts almost imperceptibly. It shifts better now than what it did when it had the old engine in it. So I think that's pretty cool, man. I'm continually astounded by those AN connections and how well they work. And I definitely understand why everyone uses AN connections for all that stuff. The one thing, I'm gonna take a quick diversion again because this is all streaming consciousness, so I apologize. The one other thing I need to fix is I never did the fuel pressure regulator upgrade on this, so I'm running, I think, like, I'm running Land Rover fuel pressure, and I really need to be running like the 48 or 50 or whatever it is for the GM. So I need to swap out the regulator on that. So I'll probably do that after Christmas, but that's not what's giving me the problems that I'm getting right now. Because I haven't really been cranking on it that hard. The other thing that I think is really cool is that engine is really what should have come in the Land Rover from the beginning, right? So from memory, it has roughly the same torque that the original Land Rover engine had on it. Certainly happy with that. It's for what I do, it's plenty. But it does have like 125 horsepower more, and you definitely feel that on the street. Like, you're not in the gas, or you're not on the accelerator anywhere near as much as I was back when it had the old engine. And I don't even drive around in sport mode. I just drive around normal mode, and the thing, it's got the right amount of power for the truck. It feels great. The downside of that part of it, the engine, is that it's just the engine itself, its personality is much louder than the original Land Rover engine. And maybe it's because it has a liter more displacement, or a liter plus, or a little less than a liter. I don't know. Maybe because it's a little bigger, it's a little louder, but I don't really think so. I mean, I'm using cast iron exhaust manifolds. That should be pretty quiet. The only thing I'm thinking of is like the thin stainless is really what's causing a lot of the loudness. But you guys saw I did the axle back exhaust, and that helped quite a bit. A lot of the road noise too is coming in. I don't have any of the panels up in the interior right now because I'm still messing around with the wiring in the passenger side foot compartment. So that there's a lot of noise coming through with that. But overall, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm really proud of myself for getting this thing up and running the way I have. I haven't done anything like that in like 10 years. So I think for the next one, I'm debating whether I want to sell this one or not. I think for the next one, it'll be more of a low key swap, and but definitely I'll do more of the transfer case adapter for the next one. So you guys that this is kind of in closing, right? So you guys that are thinking of, or you're on the Facebook group and you're like, when's Ace coming back with another kit? When are they going to do another batch of runs? I would highly recommend that you guys stay away from that. It is not the quality product that you think it is. It will run, it will get up and it will run adequately. But at least for me, it does not give me that. It's not as trustworthy as it would have been if I had just done a dropout LM7 with the 6L80 and the transfer case adapter and wired that thing up. I think it would have been a lot easier. I mean, yeah, you got to make motor mounts, right? And making motor mounts sucks if you don't have a MIG welder. It's just so much easier with the MIG. But I mean, I could have figured it out with I could have figured it out with my welder that I had. I could have made it work, and I wish I would have made that work. And that's sort of the nuts and bolts of where we're at now. So yeah, that's I'll probably do one more video that kind of shows you the final of it running and all the lights off, and hopefully I've gone through inspection and stuff. But that's really where we're at now. So this has gone on long enough. It's a lot of babbling and a lot of stream of consciousness. So yeah, Merry Christmas to all you guys, and we will see you on the next one.